What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. From Mtg, we like magic, and all week I've been bringing you weird decks that might not be ultra competitive or anything, but I think they deserve a little bit of a spotlight just because they're unique in some way or another. And I really like today's list because we get to throw around a bunch of planeswalkers on a budget. Now, I know that not everyone is super crazy about walkers all the time, and full disclosure, I've been in this for 20 years. At first, I was a little resistant to the idea myself, but as time has gone by, I've had to admit that I think they add like a pretty healthy, mostly healthy, layer of depth to the gameplay. You know, it's fun to have a walker or two out sometimes, do some cool stuff, and they seem to be really popular. At least they're some of the most hyped cards during spoiler season, so a lot of people love their walkers. But the problem is accessibility. You know, you pick up some $30 Chandras, a couple of $20 Vraskas, and suddenly you're eating cat food. You know, we've managed, though, to put together a $50 list here that have you chucking around planeswalkers, ticking them up and ticking them down, and you can still afford to get your mom something for her birthday instead of just saying the card got lost in the mail. I see you out there. I see y'all. Here's Blue-White Superfriends. Get your mama something for her birthday. Love your mama. Well, the most important part of a Planeswalker deck is exactly what Avengers are showing up in this superhero movie, so I might as well go ahead and give you what you come here for and tell you about what walkers we're playing. And we actually have a pretty good selection in this color combination, all for under $3. Check it out. We're going to play 3 copies of Jace Cunning Castaway, 2 copies of Dovin Bond, and 3 copies of Gideon Marshall Paragon. Now, none of these are as bad as their price tag might indicate. Jace has been especially good, in my experience, believe it or not. This is a relatively low-cost planeswalker that does a lot of stuff, you know. It's capable of just being a creature factory, which means, theoretically, given enough time and space and protection, this thing can crank out enough creatures to end a game by itself. And this can loot you a card during your combat step, which is pretty valuable by itself, but once you're able to get the ultimate off, even once, multiple copies of Jace can loot you a bunch of cards during your combat step, which is super relevant. Or if you're able to hit the ultimate even once, then you can crank out like 3 creatures in the next turn. That's a full board right there, and you've still got loyalty counters on your Jaces. So Jace is actually good, again, given enough time and space. This thing can run away with a game. Dovin Bond's not quite as impressive. You know, I don't have as many superlatives for old Dodo, but at the same time, this is a great utility walker. His ultimate's not going to, like, end the game by itself or anything, but his other 2 abilities are great. You can neutralize mid-sized threats, so it's a form of defense. That's great. And, even better, it can draw you cards and gain you life. There's just a lot of stuff this thing can do for us. And Marshall Paragon, I know this is going to sound crazy, but he might be my favorite of these 3 walkers in the whole deck. This has always been one of my favorite Planeswalker deck walkers. It just looks like it's on a slightly different power level than a lot of the other walkers they printed for Planeswalker decks. And it bears somewhat true, you know, just a 5-mana splashable, for that matter. 5/5 indestructible is not the worst deal. Just in and of itself, a 5-mana 5/5 indestructible is going to end a lot of games for you, and Gideon is usually what ends up ending the game. Whether it's him attacking for 5 every turn or getting to his ultimate, ticking him up every turn is actually kind of profitable because we are playing a good amount of creatures in this deck. Both Jace's +1 and Gideon's ultimate dictate that we should play some number of creatures, so this ended up being a mid-range deck. We've got more than enough creatures for Gideon's plus ability to really matter, so that's good. And it can also, post-combat, if we really, really needed to, we can let it get all of our creatures back on defense by untapping all of them. That won't be as good as the Anthem effect a lot of the time, but it is something to at least point out. And when you do get to Gideon's ultimate, that's a great way to end a game. Just tap all other dudes, give a bonus to all of your guys, and get in for lethal. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you this is the best superhero team you can assemble in all of Standard right now. You know, if Chandra and Vraska are Goku and Vegeta, then we're basically playing Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien in this deck. But that's still Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien. You know, they're pretty good fighters themselves, and this is no different. You know, we can do some really cool stuff with these Planeswalkers, and we've got a good core of cards we can build around them and still feel like we're playing a really powerful deck and have some fun ticking them up and getting ultimates and stuff. But we do have to play some creatures, so I'm going to play 18 of them, which seems like slightly low, but again, we're a mid-range deck, and when you put together like Jace and Gideon, it's like we're playing 24 creatures, so it's not as bad as it sounds. So I'm going to start here with some 1-drops, because I think we do want to play some 1-drops here. I'm going to start with just a couple of copies of Sacred Cat. Now, Cat can get in some early damage and improve our life total, or it can chump block a couple of times to get us a little bit deeper into the game to where we can get to our walkers. And, you know, when we get a walker out and we have a Sacred Cat in the graveyard, it can come back to just jump in front of that walker when we need it to protect it. So there's a lot of cool things about Sacred Cat. It's just a mana, but You know, if you've got a couple of extra bucks, Legion's Landing is definitely the better choice, but Cat is 20 cents, Legion's Landing's like $4 the last time I checked. So don't break your neck getting Legion's Landing if you don't already have them. Sacred Cat's a fine choice too, and there's some specific pluses to it in this deck, and bombing it is not bad. Now I'm also going to play 4 copies of Sky Marcher Aspirant. Really like this card in this deck, even though I know we're kind of pushing it with the number of 1-drops that we're playing. But I want to play a bunch of 1-drops in a way. You know, I want to have a relatively full board when we drop a walker so we can protect it or so that we can attack. You know, Jace and Gideon are both good with attacking creatures, at least theoretically. So I like to have a relatively full board either to defend the Planeswalker or to get aggressive if we need to. And Aspirant's awesome for all of that, you know, it's an aggressive creature that can get in early damage, it can sometimes trade with stuff bigger than it, and we've got a lot of permanents in this deck, like almost every single card in the entire deck is a permanent, so we'll hit Ascend at some point in the game, and then this gets really good with like Jace's +1 ability, you can get it in really easily with the flying, so I like a lot about what this card can do for this deck. I'm going to play a playset. But I'm also going to play 4 copies of Skyship Plunderer because of course I am. You know, this gives us the old 1-2 with Jace, allowing us to ultimate him really fast. That's awesome, but not only that, this works with all of our Planeswalkers in a similar manner, you know. We can use their minus abilities a little bit more liberally, or we can get them to ultimate really fast if we have a Plunderer out that's doing damage. I like that this is an early flying creature with 2 power, you know. This too synergizes a little bit with Jace's +1 ability. You know, flying doesn't guarantee that you'll get a creature through and you'll be able to loot, but it at least makes it a lot more likely. So there's really a lot of cool stuff about Plunderer in this deck. Plus, you know, 2-mana 2/1 flyer isn't too offensive in the first place. But I'm also going to play 4 copies of Adanto Vanguard. Been seeing a little bit of play on the channel lately, buddy. And in actual standard, too. This is in a few different lists in the meta at large. But that's because Adanto Vanguard's great. You know, it's a great early aggressive creature that's tough to deal with. And it's good in this deck for a number of reasons aside from that. Yeah, we need cheap, aggressive creatures that can score a lot of points early and all that. But this can also jump in front of a Planeswalker and be indestructible so that it can do that again if it needs to. And that's important. But we'll finish off the creatures in the deck with 2 copies of Champion of Wits and 2 copies of Sunscourge Champion. We'll split our Eternalized 3-drops here. Mostly because I really like Sunscourge Champion against mono red aggro decks. You know, this is a creature that can block twice. The second time it comes into play, it can be really aggressive if we need it to be. It's a big guy. And it can gain us 6 life in the course of a game too. So I really like Sunscourge a lot in the aggro matchup. But Champion of Wits is just unbelievable. You know, it's one of the most expensive cards in the deck. So we couldn't play too many copies of it, but we got to play some. Also worth noting that like 6 of our creatures embalm or eternalize, so even though that's not all the creatures in the world, it does make discarding cards to Champion of Wits or Jace's +1 when it fires off a little bit more bearable because we can just discard when we have them. We can discard creatures we can just get back out of our graveyard when we need to. And having some number of embalm or eternalized creatures also gives us a way to block for one of our Planeswalkers and then get that creature back to block again. But you know what? We should probably play some removal in this deck because we're usually going to be playing against an opponent. So let's play some stuff here, and I'll show them all to you at the same time. We're going to play 3 copies of Baffling End, 2 copies of Essence Scatter, 3 copies of Ixalan's Binding, and a copy of Fumigate. A Baffling End is just great early game removal that takes out a lot of creatures we care about, and it'll help us hit Ascend for Sky Marcher Aspirant for what it's worth. So I like Baffling End here. Now the 3 slots we're using for Essence Scatter and Fumigate are the only 3 like non-permanent slots in the entire deck, but I think we're using them pretty well, especially with Essence Scatter. This is just a great piece of sort of removal right now. You know, we've got a lot of creatures that we would otherwise have to deal with in this format that are really hard to deal with once they're on the battlefield, so just never let them hit the battlefield in the first place. And as far as Fumigate, you know, we've got Planeswalkers like Gideon and Jace. We've got Embalm and Eternalized creatures. So the theory here, and it plays out pretty well, is that you can hit a Fumigate even with some creatures on your board and it doesn't hurt you that bad because you've still got Gideon to get in for 5 damage, indestructible, you know, you've got Jace to make pirates for you and stuff, and you've got, you know, dudes you can bring back like Champion of Wits if they happen to be out when you Fumigate. So I really like the idea of running a sweeper in this deck. It's really good against the aggro matchup because we recover a lot better than any other deck would, usually. And finally, you see the Binding there. This is a good 45-cent way to deal with Hazoret, Scarab God, Ronus, Rekindling Phoenix, just the litany of tough-to-deal-with creatures in this format, and they can never ever play them again. ever. So I recommend the 3 copies of Ixalan's Binding. This is one of the best cheap, price-wise, removal spells available to us in the entire meta. Now we're playing 25 lands in this deck. I was on 24 at first, but decided I wanted that extra land to get to the 6 mana to Eternalize Champion of Wits, or always have 5 mana on turn 5, or at least as reliable as possible for Gideon. So I think 25 ended up being the right number here. And if you have a couple of extra bucks, just a couple, then replace 2 Meandering River and then a Plains and an Island with 4 Irrigated Farmland. You want those bicycle lands if you can afford them. That being said, though, Glacial Fortress is the most expensive card in the deck, believe it or not. It's like $3 right now. So if you can't afford those, all you have to do is replace them with Plains or Islands, or perhaps even Evolving Wilds might work out for you. There's a bunch of stuff you can do to shore up this mana base, make it more or less expensive depending on your needs. But here's our super shoestring sideboard right here. This is a very cheap board that we're running with, and we actually get some pretty good value out of it. Slash of Talons is actually showing up in some sideboards in real decks, so we'll take our cue from them, end up with a couple of copies against aggro's really fast creatures. Anorna Priest is also decent against aggro and gives us more in Bomb. That's not bad. We got some tokens coming into play due to a Bomb and Internalize, and Jace for that matter, so Anorna Priest can gain us a little bit of life. Good blocker in the early game against aggro decks too. We've also got the 4th copy of Baffling End and some Essence Scatters when we run up against creature-based decks and just creatures we don't want to have to deal with. Same thing with Sunscourge Champion. Can you tell I hate the aggro matchup in this list? Sunscourge Champion's good against them too, but don't let that fool you. We've also got Negate and even a copy of Jace's Defeat to deal with the control-based decks. Negate is just a great reason to be in blue at all. No jokes. All jokes aside, Negate is one of the best blue cards in the entire format, and if you have a board with blue in it, I think all 4 copies of Negate should go in. For 10 cents, this is one of the best cards in the whole meta. And here are your power rankings. A final score of 60, which is not super competitive, obviously, but not too shabby either for a deck that's really cheap to put together. Actually does, outside of the Planeswalkers, contain some really good cards in this meta right now. A lot of our removal and a lot of our creatures actually see play in one deck or another, or even multiple decks. So it's not like we're, not powerful or anything. We actually have a respectable power score at the end of the day, and we get to do some really cool stuff with these walkers sometimes. Actually hitting a Gideon ultimate, or actually even just hitting a Jace ultimate, is really, really cool. And don't let these deceive you. I know that these are cheap walkers and some of them have a bad rap, especially Cunning Castaway, which I don't get. One of my takeaways from playing this deck is that Cunning Castaway has gotten a bad reputation for no reason. There were a couple of times in games where this thing can just take over a game by itself. Again, if we're able to control the board and get enough blockers to give it some space, it can create a few creatures, draw us a couple of cards, and eventually double itself. And then things get really out of control, doubling, really tripling up. A Jace is really crazy, you guys, and this deck can do it. So give this thing a shot. If you want to play a Super Friends deck for the absolute lowest price imaginable, this is your option in Standard, and it's not half bad. And if you are interested in checking this deck list out, you can do the usual thing and look right down there below me in the description box. Get your mind out of the gutter. In the description box, just hit show more and click the very first link that you see there. That'll take you over to my sponsors at TCG Player. They're good folks over there. They help sponsor my content, and they also happen to be the cheapest place you can grab this deck up. So click the first link in the description, go over there and check the list out. But I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out for this one. Let me know how you liked it down there in the comments section. Anything I didn't talk about or any cards I didn't play that you think I should have, let me know. And anything I did right, you can let me know that too. If you liked it, let me know. And you can do that too by liking the video. Just click thumbs up. Super low effort. Helps me out. Or if you want to, you can sub to the channel. Lots of good content coming up. Masters 25 coming out soon. Dominaria hot on its heels after that. Can't freaking wait. So make sure you sub to the channel to get all the Dominaria content that's soon to be coming up. And you can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. There's tons of stuff you can do. If you really like me, you can always throw me $1 whole a month over on patreon.com/SBMTG, and I'll let you know what decks we're doing the day before we do them. Money for information. That's how it should be. But anyway, if you want to support the channel, I'll leave you a link down there in the description too. So check all that stuff out, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.